Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited because today we have, I'm sorry, I never asked, is it Helena or Elena? Or Elena?
Both, either.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. We're going with Helena. So yeah, I have Helena here with me. She is a UX Academy alumni, and today we're gonna hear a really cool story because she is also the co-founder and head of product for Moonai. Is that correct? Yeah. Really excited. So I'm actually stoked to hear your story. I don't think I even know it. So we'll give everyone about a minute to join. We already have our first person in the chat who's going to say hello, I believe. But yeah, hello from Atlanta. Yeah, this is awesome. So yeah, we'll get started in a little bit. But yeah, say hello in the chat. From LA, NYC, Florida, we have everyone here. So this is incredible. Helena, where are you located?
I'm in Barcelona, Spain.
Is it nice and warm there already? Nice and toasty?
Yes, it is amazing.
Oh my goodness. How's the weather for everyone else? Maybe getting toasty? Hello from San Diego. Hi, I'm in San Diego too. Yay. Oh, hot. Oh, okay. We're getting there. We're getting there. Spring-like. Okay, we'll take it. All right, cool. So as everyone is coming in, like everyone else is doing right now, say hello in the chat, share your LinkedIn, all that fun stuff. In there, if you have questions along the way, please toss them in the questions tab. And then towards the end of our chat here, we're going to pull questions from there. So yeah, pick Helena's brain based on what she's telling us. Like I said, she is a UX Academy alumni, so she's also gone through the journey as well. So, you know, we all have our own journeys, our own perspectives on, you know, what went well and maybe what we could have done better in UX Academy. But hey, everything's a learning experience, right?
Beginner's mind. Yes.
Yes. All right, cool. So I'm Emily. For those who don't know, I'm the community manager for Design Lab, also a UX Academy alumni. So yeah, we're very well versed in the journeys here. But this will be recorded in case, you know, you want to share this out with anyone. It's going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Everyone knows the drill. So yeah, say hi. Please toss your LinkedIn in the chat. And then if you have questions along the way, please toss them in the questions tab. Alumni from what year? Helena, when did you graduate?
This year.
This year. All right.
Yeah.
And I graduated in 2017, so 4 years ago. So UX Academy has changed quite a bit, but for, you know, by way of product design, things should change and, you know, transform naturally. But yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Elena to introduce herself, and then we'll kind of jump into the usual questions. And then, like I said, if anything kind of comes to mind and you want to ask her, please toss them in the questions tab and we'll answer it at the end. Handing it over to you, Elena.
Cool. Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you, everyone who's writing in for joining. I'm really excited to be here. So as Emily said, my name is Helena. I am co-founder and head of product of Moonai. For those of you who don't know, as most of you probably don't because we just started last year, Moonai is an app that uses sound relief for period pain. And so we launched in October. And so right now we're in the midst of redesigning the app. And so my job is being a co-founder, which means doing a million different things, but also overseeing product direction, product strategy, and the entire user experience design as well. And being an advocate for the user and a customer at the end of the day.
I bet multitasking gets a little bit challenging, huh? What's your favorite tool to organize things?
It's really fun. It's not for everybody, I must say. Everyone who joins the team kind of in the screening process, you know, I have to remind them that it is a startup. And what that means is that things are incredibly messy, chaotic, uncertain, and really challenging. And so I don't think it's for everybody, definitely. And things change really quickly. And so the more you can be comfortable with that uncertainty and that change, and the more you can just kind of ride the wave, the better off you'll be and the less of a headache you'll have. But in terms of task management, we use Notion. This is our tool of choice. Yeah.
It's super flexible.
Yeah. We've used Trello before, but I prefer Notion's look and feel. It's just more neutral. And yeah, the function is simpler to me. So yeah, but we also do a lot of Google Docs and Google Drive, and it's death by Google Doc, so.
Oh my gosh, who can relate to that, right? I feel like everyone can.
Yeah.
All right, so let's actually dive in. So we're gonna backtrack a little bit because I would like to actually know kind of your thoughts on like working in a startup and kind of what drove you in that direction. But we'll get to that. But I'm sure everyone here is probably curious. You're head of product now, you're co-founder, but what were you doing before UX Academy?
So right before, and maybe roughly around midway through, I was working as a UX and digital engagement designer for this super cool nonprofit in the US called National Domestic Workers Alliance. And I was actually working in the social innovations tech lab, kind of leveraging technology for social impact, and specifically for women and lower income women who are domestic workers. So I was doing that for about 3 years. And then before that, I was also like a UX and content strategist. My UX journey started in UX writing, so about 7 or 8 years ago. And I've worked at different marketing and design agencies, for clients, like super huge clients like HP, like multinational, enormous companies, but also smaller mom and pop stores as well, like bike shops and things like that. And so I kind of fell into it. I kind of fell into UX without really knowing that it was UX. It wasn't really called that. I feel like it's more of a buzzword now than it was, 7 or 8, 9 years ago. And so I started working at this healthcare company, and I helped create the digital experiences for their users across multiple touch points in their digital presence. And so I was in charge of the UX micro copy and the UX writing and the UI writing, and just kind of, helping the user take action. But it wasn't called UX. We didn't call it that, It was, I can't remember what we called it. Content writer, I think, or something like that. And so when I look back and think about it, I know, it is essentially UX. I feel like you could define it in so many different ways, but at the end of the day, what I was trying to do was to figure out what our users' needs were and how, in the specific context that they were using the product, and using words to help drive action and help us achieve our business goals, So that to me is UX. That's the core of it, right? So I started that, about 7 or 8 years ago, and kind of, I came in and out of the experience across different touch points of the product lifecycle. But right before UXA, I was at this social innovations tech lab. And then as I was in UXA, I just shifted and co-founded my own company. So I was in UXA while that happened as well.
So what kind of made you decide, like, hey, I need to, attend a boot camp or maybe kind of add to my skill set? Like, what was like the driving force there?
It's always something I do every year, every couple of years. Learning to me is a continuous process. So it's something that I'm always looking to do, be it in UX, in like writing poetry, comedy writing. Like, I'm always looking to upskill myself and kind of stretch my mind in new ways. But I really wanted to feel more confident, and I wanted to really get other perspectives, specifically regarding other processes, because the process that we relied on was lean and lean UX. And I was really interested in exploring other types of processes that you might use in the UX, design field. So I started exploring, and I started looking at different options. I didn't want to commit to like a master's degree. I was looking at that, like master's degree in HCI or something like that. But that seemed really daunting. I was like, oh, I don't want to go to grad school now. Like, no. But I didn't want this like short 2-week or 4-week kind of intro course. I wanted something that was continuous and supportive. So I wanted the mentorship one-on-one experience as well. And that ultimately, was what convinced me about Design Lab, as well as the fact, this was super important. I remember I was so, rigorous in my note-taking. I called so many different boot camps. I took so many notes. Like, I was so diligent in my, but I think one of the things that really, really appealed to me was the fact that you can choose your capstone projects, or that you have a lot more freedom in your capstone projects. Other boot camps are very like strict in that. You have to follow the same, the capstone that they, that they give you. That might have changed, and I'm sure that will be changing and iterating. But when I was looking, that is what ultimately convinced me, because I was so clear in what I wanted to achieve. I knew what I wanted to work on. I knew what my goal was. So I wanted to be able to work on whatever I wanted. I didn't want to be told what to do, So yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, that actually led right into my next question, which also came from our questions tab. So that's awesome. So I guess rounding off, your pre or even beginning of UXA life, like now that you've gone through it, what's your advice for anyone who is just starting out? Because we just have a new cohort that started yesterday, but anyone who's just starting out either with UXA or just even looking into UX design as a potential career switch, like what's your advice for them?
It kind of depends on what they're looking for and what their needs are, right? I think the advice that I would have given myself and that I would give someone who's just starting out, I mean, to me, it's something I always remind myself of, is that we are all designers to some extent. We all have some design experience in one form or another. Because to me, design is a verb. It's something that you do. It's something that you practice. So it's something also about, stretching your mind in new ways and to envision new possibilities you hadn't considered before. And I feel like we all have that skill. We could all, hone that skill. Because I also want to say it is a skill you hone. It's something that, it's a discipline. It's something that you study and have experience and get better at, So it's kind of like that muscle at the gym that you have to flex. You won't get strong by not going to the gym. You have to go to the gym, to get stronger. Unless you have like amazing genetics and, don't have to. So you're like that prodigy designer who doesn't have to study or practice, But I think general piece of advice that I like to give is, or like to think and be reminded of, is that there is that inner source of truth, and trusting that and being self-confident, and that you do have what it takes, you just have to work at it, and you have to be intentional and mindful about it. Because I think a lot of us starting out might be overcome by self-doubt and imposter syndrome, or kind of question ourselves constantly. And while that's great to question yourself and always be, questioning your assumptions and, am I doing this right? Am I wrong? I mean, that's great to implement as a practice, but I think the more that you can develop your inner discernment from the beginning, I think that is always a good reminder for myself. And also, on a more practical level for anyone transitioning into UX, I think practicing is a really important part, right? So not only maybe wireframing or prototyping, but going to museums, reading, inspiration, looking at what other people are doing, kind of going out in nature and kind of fine-tuning that perception of, what's the color palette I'm looking at here in the sunset, and why does it work, and what are the design principles I'm seeing here, and kind of turning that switch on all the time, I think is also really helpful and will help you become a better designer and problem solver, Yeah, I could go on and on, but that's kind of what comes to mind right now, yeah.
I think that just kind of speaks to, what you had previously mentioned about, you're always wanting to learn, you're always wanting to grow. And Peter had said, that's, what did Peter say? Always leveling up. And I think that's so true, right? That's definitely like my mindset, like as a UX designer, we shouldn't want to stop learning. We should want to keep on learning all the time, just because trends are changing all the time. We kind of have to maintain that balance of like, what's cool and what's trending versus like, what are people familiar with, right? Like there's always that fine line of balance. So I think it's always like understanding how to do that really, really well with finesse. But you did mention imposter syndrome, which I'm sure is a hot topic. Is that something you still go through? And if yes, how do you cope with it, or how do you kind of work through it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually had an interesting conversation about this with someone the other day. I think imposter syndrome is also one of those buzzwords that we can talk about without really thinking critically about it. So I do think that self-doubt is really real, and feeling insecure and feeling vulnerable. I do like to point out and call out that there are structural, systems in place that specifically for women, I think, position us put us in a place that isn't as, how can I say, it's not as in our favor as for men designers maybe, or men in the field. So I like to recognize that self-doubt and vulnerability is a thing, but there are also, specifically in the startup world, it's really male-dominated space, where overconfidence is valued more than competence, and kind of being the loudest, taking up as much space as possible, and manipulating users into getting them do what you want them to do is kind of what is prized. And so I think in that kind of environment, it's normal to feel imposter syndrome, because I'm not like that. That doesn't fit my character at all. And there are a lot of times where I'm comparing myself to others and my peers, and I'm like, wait, but I'm not the loud. I don't want to be loud. Like, I just want to sit and listen, and I value soft skills, and I value listening and trying to be as empathetic, also another buzzword, as possible. And there are a lot of times where I feel very, me and my co-founder, because she's also identifies as female and as a woman, we feel very alone in that space, and so to me, there's that nuance. Imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and all that is real, but there are also environments that can be conducive to having you feel left out or, not good enough, So being able to recognize that, I think, and discern and make that distinction is also really important. And finding support. I think something else I wanted to mention about the UXA experience and just design experience in general, the more you can do it collaboratively and with other people and kind of find your tribe, the better off you'll be, because design it's not done in a silo, and sometimes I felt that way at times in UXA, where I was like, why am I doing this alone? I'm feeling, where's the dev team? I need to be talking to the dev team, So the more I think that you can reflect that in the UXA experience, the collaboration and talking to other people and working with other people, I think the more successful and better prepared you'll be later on in an actual role, because it is like that, right? So yeah,
totally. And I actually see Mel just put something in the chat. She's part of our new student life committee that was established earlier this year. So we definitely have we have a large group of folks now who are, they've just been so much more open at like wanting to like, hey, like, can we work together? Even if it means being in a Zoom room together for 7 hours and like everyone's on mute, but we're just working together. Was that something that you were able to do while you were in UX Academy? Like kind of, network with maybe your cohort classmates or even just other people in the program where you were like, let's just jam together?
I mean, not as much as I would have liked, but definitely my group crit group, we really vibed, and it was, we just came to understand each other and really share kind of our pains and our glories, and I felt very connected, and I felt like I belonged. We all kind of belonged to this community. So I found that in the group crits, with Carmela. Shout out to Carmela, she's amazing. And yeah, but I was so busy. Honestly, I was, and this happens to a lot of people, I think, in UXA, peers and people that I would connect with on Slack for user research or usability testing or whatever. We're so busy, some of us, it makes it really hard also to find those co-working moments. Because I was founding my company, I was, going to rounds of investment, trying to pitch the startup, and that's super crazy process as well and stressful. And so, yeah, I wish I'd done it more, honestly. But yeah.
You can always come back and help. We have a little alumni committee now, so you can always come back and help. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's do one more curated question around your UX experience, and then we'll kind of dive in because it seems like a lot of people here are very interested in your space, like the femtech space, and you know, any opportunities. And I think it would be great for us to like hear about Moonai. But final question: what was, I guess, your high and you know even low points of UXA? You know, anything that you know was like a highlight, anything that you felt like could have gone better. You know, and I'd love to have you enlighten us a little bit.
I think the highlight and the biggest struggle were the weekly calls with my mentor, honestly. I think, yeah, so he is incredible, and he's an incredible mentor, and he at times is really encouraging and, you know, insightful and caring. Other times just really brutally honest, which I really liked that and wanted that, and was one of the reasons why I just I'm so grateful for his support. But those, yeah, that was grueling at times, really painful. And then other times it was the highlight. It's like, yes, he approved. He said this presentation was the best presentation he's ever seen. Yes, you know, and that was also the highlight. Is just, to me, that was the core, the essence of my entire UXA experience was those calls with him, because he helped me become a better designer and communicator, provided me with so many tools, and shaped me, you know, for the better. And I don't think I would be the product director, strategist, or whatever that I am if it wasn't for him. So I am so grateful for him. Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice he's given you, or like the best thing he's ever told you that's stuck with you? Are there like a billion things?
A billion things, yeah. But he has these mantras that he likes to repeat. I think the one that is that I actually turned to like a poster that I have in my office is trust the process. Like that is just something that he would repeat every week, and that I just have taken with me to heart. You know, just trust the process. Trust the process. You know, at times when you are in the valley of despair where everything, you know, seems so bleak and nothing makes sense and you just want to give up, you know, just being reminded, you know, just trust the process it's like that breath of fresh air that pulls you out of the depth, you know? And so he told me, yeah, he would always tell me that, because I do struggle with a lot of, like any designer, I think we get stuck, right? Or we get insecure, or we judge ourselves, or, you know, the inner critic can be really brutal sometimes, you know? And so the fact that he just kind of pulled me out of that and was like, hey, trust the process. It's okay. It's going to be okay. You know, was really, really helpful.
I feel like my mentor did that, but he was very quiet about how he did it. So mine was more like, how come you're not telling me more? How come you're not, you know, doing, you know, saying and giving me all this feedback? He's like, because you're going with the process. He's like, it's fine. If there was something that I needed to course correct, I will say so. And that was, you know, looking at it in hindsight, it only clicked in my head last year that like what he was trying to do was to get me to build confidence in myself. And that was where I was severely lacking. You know, he's like, if something's wrong, I will let you know. But other than that, he's like, exactly, trust the process. Like, know that you're doing great. Like, I will stop you if you're not.
Yeah. And he would also, I think something he helped me understand as well was that it's not that I suck, is that it's really hard. So making that distinction, I think, was really important, you know, because I think we can get bogged down in, oh, I'm a terrible designer, or I don't know, I don't have what it takes, or blah, 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 you know, I don't have experience, or we kind of get that kind of the inner critic and inner judgment. But making that distinction is like, no, it's just really hard. It's difficult, you know, and that's okay. You know, a skilled sailor doesn't become skillful by navigating on calm waters, right? Like skill is developed by navigating the storm and the hurricane, and, you know, building resilience is the process, right? So yeah, totally.
Go through it every single day.
Yeah.
All right, so we're actually going to tackle Laura's question. So really interested in the femtech field, just submitted a capstone project of Women's Health App on Sunday. Can you speak a bit about the femtech market landscape and UX opportunities that you're seeing right now?
It's huge. It's huge, and it's so untapped. Like the potential is just astronomical, and it's on the rise. It's, you know, billions and billions worth market size, total addressable market size. And the possibilities there are just so many to explore. So the term itself was coined, I think it was 2013 by the founder of ideation. So it's a new concept. Like, it's not something that has been around forever, and so it's, yeah, there's so much to explore with femtech that it's so exciting. And something that I really like about the femtech space is how collaborative it is. So with other sectors or other industries, it can be really, really competitive, especially in the startup world. And you're always, what's your competitive advantage and what's your value proposition that sets you apart, the key differentiator that sets you apart from, your competitors, blah, blah, blah. But with the femtech, what we've found is that a lot of our potential competitors actually end up being our allies and our partners. So that's something that's really cool, because we share this mission and this vision for the world, that women's health can be respected and valued and seen and heard. And we all kind of share that, I mean, most of us, a lot of players are in the field to just make money. We know that, and there are a lot of them out there as well. But that's not the majority. The majority of us out there are actually, working towards this vision that we have. And so that makes it much more friendly and just collaborative. So that's really cool. And I welcome and invite everyone to explore the femtech space, because there's so much need. I mean, there's so much yet to do to improve women's health, and well-being, that we need more people in the femtech space, And my co-founder business is going to kill me for saying that, but no, not more competitors. Don't bring more people in. But it's really exciting, and it's just getting more. It's just getting bigger. It's getting bigger and bigger. So.
Awesome. So I guess, I know you mentioned, you knew exactly what you wanted to do, coming into UXA, dive into your capstones. Did you already have the name Moonai picked out? Did you already have the concept already kind of thought out, as you headed into phase 2 working on your capstones, or is it something that you had thought of while you were working through the earlier parts of the program?
It was about halfway through. So I did use the capstones as my sandbox for Moonai. And I did a lot of the user research, and I think my first capstone was on Moonai. And so thought of it, about halfway through. So we joined this program, this startup incubator program in September. And so I had joined UXA in June. So, or in October we joined, So, and that was great, because I was able to apply a lot of things I was learning simultaneously, both in UXA and also in startup. So that kind of the crossover was really helpful. And also getting insight from a mentor, right? Like I think what was really great was that I was able to do a real project. And that's also something that I think I would recommend to people to do for their capstones, is the more you can work on real life projects with companies or your own company, or the better, because for me at least, it's more motivating, because there are consequences, right? And there are stakeholders, and you have to present it, and there are other people involved. And I think that also really helped and kept it exciting. But startups are iterative, and the project Moonai has iterated so many times, So what was my capstone is not Moonai anymore, right? Because it's changed and iterated and pivoted so many times, So.
And just remember, everyone, you don't have to dive into capstone 1 knowing exactly what you want to do. You have up to 3. You have up to 3. All right, so we're going to bring it back to something a little bit more general. What would your suggestion or tips be to non-designers entering the UX world? I don't know if you consider, I know you mentioned that you did, now we deem it UX writing before UXA, but do you feel like you weren't a designer beforehand? Because I know, we talked about design isn't just putting something on an artboard or on a canvas. Like it's much more than that. It's like a thing that you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to your strategy, right? So you can think of your UX career as like strategically, right? So what I mean is, what is your goal and what actions can you take to help you achieve your goal? And so I think that's what sets you up for success. I don't think exploring one path or the other necessarily is better. I think it just depends on what your goal ultimately is and what your strategy is, right? So yeah, to me, that's kind of the key element to it. So for someone who's a non-UX designer or non-designer, I would just ask them, or I'd invite them to think about that. What's your strategy? What is it you want to achieve? You know, where do you want to work? What kind of jobs do you want to have? You know, what's the light at the end of your tunnel? And the way to get there could be murky and messy, and you might not know, and that's totally fine. And it might change, and that's also totally fine. But I think it's a good idea to shape your roadmap a little bit, you know, kind of more or less get an idea of what direction you want to go in, or what your destination is, so you can decide what direction you want to go in, rather. Yeah, I think that's kind of how I would approach that, or how I would recommend a non-designer and a designer as well. To me, clarity of thought is a really important part of the process, no matter if you're in UX design, industrial design, interior design. You know, not only is having the design chops really important, but the communication and the ability to transform and synthesize what you're thinking into concrete action is also a really important part of the process. So that kind of just comes with the job, I think. Clarity of thought, right? So get your thoughts clear, get your roadmap clear, think about where it is you want to go, and then you can carve the roadmap to get you there.
So for someone who, you know, is making the transition or is brand new to UX design, and, you know, they come to you with a question of like, should I be a generalist or should I specialize? How would you answer that question?
Honestly, I think it comes down to strategy. I think it depends on what it is you want to achieve. And it also depends on where your motivations lie, I think, and where your interests lie. I think it also takes some inner work and some inner introspection to figure out what is best for you, right? Not only what's the market like and who are my competitors and how can I set myself apart, right? Because if you look at the job hunt process as a competitive landscape, and other UX designers are competitors, if you kind of think of it that way, right? So there is that kind of how do you set yourself apart? But it's also, is it right for me? I mean, maybe being a generalist, for me, I prefer more focus, maybe, you know? So maybe where other people have, 10 times the resources or kind of ability to do X, Y, and Z, maybe I have 10 times the focus on one specific thing, right? And so focusing all my energy and efforts on something specific might be right for me, right? Maybe for someone else, it's not. Maybe for someone else, it could be, no, I want to have, dip my toes in a bunch of different things in a bunch of different areas and be able to I don't want my job to be the same every week, and I want it to change constantly. And I like that. And I like multitasking and doing a bunch of different things and wearing a lot of different hats. If that goes with your personality and your character, then a generalist kind of approach would suffice. I must say though, now being on the other end and hiring people and screening portfolios and looking for candidates, I tend to look for the people who are really crafted, who have really are really gifted or have really honed and worked really hard at a specific skill. So I tend to look for the focus, like the more specific. But I know that other agencies, most of the agencies probably are looking for the generalist kind of, we want a UX and UI designer, because we don't have the budget to pay for two. So we want you to do both, So I think, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I am a strategist. So I think it comes down to that also. Where do you want to work? What do you want your day-to-day to look like? And one or the other, or you could start with one and then move to the other. I think that's also, there's always room to for growth and for change. And so I don't think it should be this thing that you decide and stick with for the rest of your life. Like, you can change your mind, and that's totally fine, you know?
Yeah. No, totally. And in general, I feel like the entire process is such a holistic process where you can't just divvy it up and not relate it back to another piece, right? So you can't just be a visual or UX designer and not pay attention to any of the UX that happened like prior to that. Like, it's just that way. So for anyone out there, don't feel like you also have to figure out your plan or your strategy at the very beginning. It's something that you can always figure out even after you're done with the program, or like when you're even into your career and you're like, oh, maybe I want to switch gears. Maybe, maybe I don't really enjoy this as much. It happens, like, completely. I will share that for me, I know that I'm not very strong at visual and UI design. So that was an area that I pushed myself to be, I guess, more proficient in when I was in UX Academy. So I used one of my capstones to do that. I was like, hey, mentor, I really am not great at visual design. Push me, how do we make this capstone more visual design focused? So everyone, you can always do it that way. Have a different focus for your capstones as a way to kind of plan out your strategy and figure out like what's actually best for you.
Yeah, that's something we ask at Moonai, or like our team members, when it kind of on the onboarding process. I always ask them, it's like, where do you want to grow in? What's the skill set that you want to hone and get better at? Because I think that's really important. And to know that and be able to take action to develop those skills, I think that is also part of the process, right? And that's great. I think every job should allow for that, Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like there's always so much concern over, oh my gosh, if I say I'm not proficient at something, they're not going to hire me, right? Like, oh, like I say I'm not good at something, I'm not going to get the job, because there's that kind of hidden expectation of like, you have to be great at all the things, even if it's not part of the actual job requirement.
Yeah, I know that it can feel that way. And I've had that experience also, but I don't, again, like, I'm on the other side now, and the rejections are not about you. Like, it's not about you, so it's not because you don't have, or you're not good enough, or you don't have, you don't know how to use, Mixpanel, or I don't know, some tool, right? It's more about the recruiter or the employer, the company, their needs, their frustrations, their goals, their motivations, just like in, user research. It's what's going on with them. And, if they ask you to join, it's because you fit what they're looking for. But if they don't ask you to join, it's not because of you, it's just because their specific needs are different, right? And that's okay. And it's, yeah, so it's not that you suck, it's that it's difficult, so it's, it's just coming back to that, right? So yeah, I think now that I'm on the other side, things just look different. Because I've been through that, and I still go through that, right? Like the job hunting process, and feeling, how do I target, or how do I cater my portfolio, my resume, my cover letter, my interview to kind of convince them that I am what they need, right? But you don't want that. You don't want to convince them. Like, you want to be the right fit. So it shouldn't be this extra effort where you kind of fake your way into it. Like, it should be something that
it should be like a natural fit for both sides.
Yeah, and honest and transparent and authentic, because that's what you want, right? Like, that's the kind of employer you want, and that's who they want to work with as well, So it's hard. I mean, job searching is really hard, and growing.
It's a job in its own.
Yeah, and disappointing, and just, yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah.
But it builds resilience.
A lot of us have been there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. That's something that I love to tell students, that even if you hear back and it's a no, at least you did hear back. That means that someone did at least take the time to look at your application. They may have glanced at your portfolio, and to your point, maybe it's just not what they're looking for. It's definitely not about you as the applicant, but I feel like the worst thing that can ever happen is just not hearing back, right? Like, to me, I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to work for a company like that anyway, because you couldn't even send me a templatized email that said no, thank you. So that's kind of how I view it. But let's switch gears a little bit. We do have a question on time management during the course. Any tips or advice on managing your time?
Yeah, I mean, more than time management, I think it was stress management. I think that's what my issue was. Just building the emotional balance and mental balance to just find joy in the work. I think that's what was harder for me. But in terms of time management, just planning ahead was really helpful. My mentor, I think, was really structured in that sense. So he provided the timelines, he provided the, what deliverables by when. So kind of that product management hat, like he provided that framework. And so that was really helpful. That was helpful. I know I talked to a couple peers who their mentor didn't provide that, and because it was, the invitation was for them to explore how to figure it out on their own. And I think that if that had been my case, I would have reached out to other people and asked other people, hey, how are you managing your time? What tools are you using? Like, what's your planner like? I would have reached out and asked other people. So that was really helpful because he also gave me ultimatums. So he was like, if you don't turn in your deliverable by your due date, I will, I don't know. He would just he would threaten me with something. I mean, not threaten is too harsh a word, but he would say, this is serious. You have to turn it in by this day, this deadline, because you're committing. And so there was this accountability structure that really, really helped me with the time management. Yeah, for sure. And I really I took it seriously. So that helped. But yeah, I think the stress management was my issue. And to help myself with that, I think I did what I usually do, which is I try to make sure I'm channeling my stress in ways that I know make me feel good. So I work out. I'm a competitive swimmer, so I train every day. I make sure I'm eating well. I go on a walk. I pet my dog. I just being intentional about doing the things that I know are good for me, and trying my best to prioritize them. But easier said than done. But I must say that was, I think, harder for me. Yeah.
So hopefully we didn't scare anyone about the whole, timeline and you need to submit things. But, now that Helena's on the other side, being in a startup world, deadlines are a real thing. You have stakeholders to appease, you have to deliver something to them when you do presentations, letting them know hey, here's the roadmap. Your investment's not going to waste. We're doing all these things. So deadlines are a very real thing, which is, kind of why structure is built into UXA to some capacity, which, it does very, very much mimics, I would say, the real world, having been a designer in a few companies already. So I don't know if you can attest to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And clients as well. I think it's, with investors, it's also really stressful, but working for clients, it can also be really stressful when they want everything for yesterday, or they want to change deadlines, or they want to, they're just pressuring you because they have their own deadline. So they need you to, move your deadline, and that kind of chain of reaction could be really, really stressful. And deadlines are really they're really important. And I think it's a whole kind of skill to develop as well, is to how to meet them and not kind of die along the way, because it can be really stressful. And also communicating that you can't make the deadline is also really important. That if it's not about, there are times when you just can't meet the deadline, right? And you just can't make it. And so owning up to that and taking responsibility for that, and then communicating that, is also this whole other area in and of itself that merits, so much kind of praise, because it's so hard to do. So yeah, I mean, I would take, throughout UXA, I would take the deadline seriously as much as possible, just because, like you said, it's like that in the real world. So yeah, definitely.
But don't tell people you can't meet a deadline when you're at the deadline. Tell them a few days before, Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes, don't do that.
If anyone here is a Gilmore Girls fan, because I watch Gilmore Girls religiously, I remember there was a professor in the show who was like, oh, I had people ask me for extensions, and here's what I say: here's your due date, set your own due date 1 to 2 weeks prior, and that's how you give yourself an extension. So I do that with my alarms daily. If I need to be up by 8 a.m., my alarm is set for 6:50 or 7, because that allows me to snooze as many times as I want. So I basically set myself a fake deadline. So yeah, I see a lot of laughs in the reaction, so that's awesome. All right. We have, I think, 2 more questions, but 2 of them are related. So I guess, what resources do you use to keep yourself up to date with UX design trends and best practices? And where do you go for these sources of inspiration?
So it depends on what I'm working on. And it kind of depends on what our agenda is. And it's also related to kind of what it is I want to learn about and grow in. There are a couple books that I have as just on my table that are like my dictionaries that I just always recur to. So one of them is About Face by Alan Cooper. It's outdated in a lot of ways, but so useful in so many other ways. So I have, this book full of, Post-its, and just go back to it because each paragraph I think can be really insightful. I also have a lot of references related to story because with a background in UX writing, I also just being a woman-centered and feminist UX designer, I do really care about story and what are the user stories and how can I, as within the product, tell the story that we want to tell. So I have a couple of books around that as well, and references as well. But in terms of design trends, I think there are a couple of magazines that I check like daily. I might spend 15 to 20 minutes every day. Abducido is one. I don't know how you say it in English. Abducido. I don't know what the pronunciation is. Print Mag is another one I like. Dribble also, just to kind of flip through. But I do like the magazines that have the commentary. So not only like things like Dribble or Behance, you might be able to see people's work, but there are a couple, like Abducido, they go into a deep dive of the actual work. And so I find that to be insightful as well, just to see how other people are commenting and critiquing design. I find that to be really, really important and helps me also kind of frame my own. Yeah, there are a couple podcasts I listen to. I'm recently more kind of in the product world, so product, leadership and strategy and all that. So maybe less so in UX, but like Product Talk is a really great podcast. Teresa Torres, she's great. She just came out with a book as well. I try to find voices like thought leaders who are not kind of your norm. I try to look for the diverse kind of voices out there as well. So there are a couple things. Yeah, I also read a lot of research papers as well, like the academic. I just love the nerd in me loves reading research. So that not so much maybe on the trends, but more in kind of like the behavioral psychology and cognitive cognitive science as well. So I like to make sure that my decisions are grounded in research. So. Yeah, so those are a couple things, I think. Humane by Design is another great resource that I go to almost every day. I'm really interested in inclusive design and just making design more ethical. So that's another great website that I use and go to regularly. Yeah.
Peter wants to know if you are a Ravenclaw, if you are a Harry.
A Ravenclaw. No.
There's your answer, Peter. No.
No, I'm not. Sorry if that's disappointing.
Well, I mean, now we need to know, which house do you think you would be in before we get to the last 2 questions and call this a day?
Honestly, I would probably be the outsider who doesn't want to be told what to do or be put anywhere, I would be the rebel who just kind of like starts her own house, I think. That's what I would do, yeah.
We heard it here, everyone. Like Harry Potter, the franchise is going to have a 5th house now, so it's
yeah.
Okay, so we would, learn more about Moonai in a little bit, but we have a question. Oh, can you spell? We have no idea how to spell. Is that Abducido?
Abducido. So it's AB. Let me
Or if you can link it and toss it in the chat, yeah.
So it's ABDZ is the name of the website, but then the whole spelling is ABDUZEEDO. So it's
There we go.
People talking about design, photography, and UX. It's like a design magazine.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Steph, for finding that link. Okay. All right. Let's pivot. Let's talk about Moonai for a little bit. Just because, you know, I'm actually I'm excited about it, but I would love to learn more about, like, you know, what is the premise for the application?
So I think both my co-founder and I, we've been struggling with period pain for years, decades even. So it's something that is very personal to both of us and is a personal experience. And so we know what it's like to go to the doctor and be told that it's normal, that there's nothing you can do. You just kind of, you know, can take painkillers or birth control. And so growing up not having the options that we think we deserve is something that we've, you know and understand really, really well. We also know that there's room for something better. And so I think one of the premises of Moonai is that there is room for something better, and that period pain isn't something that we just have to put up with, that it's not okay, even though it's normal or common. That doesn't make it okay. You know, up to 80% of people who menstruate experience pain. That's, you know, we're talking about almost half the population living in chronic pain for decades. And so there's a profound kind of radical resistance to that at Moonai. And we know that there's, yeah, like I said, room for something better. And so we envision this world where, you know, those of us who are female bodied don't have to live in chronic pain for years. And we're making that vision a reality by helping people who menstruate feel better and live pain-free. And so our app is built around finding ways to help people not only relieve their pain, but also figure out how to manage it better and how to prevent it from happening. Because it is something that you can prevent. I mean, there are a lot of nuances to that, and, you know, medical conditions, and there are a lot of different factors to menstrual pain, and different causes of it. So, but pain education and body literacy is also another important pillar, right? So something that we learned in our user research is how many people don't know what causes their pain. That was just mind-blowing to us, you know, and is my own case, has been my own situation as well, right? Just going up like, oh, well, that's just what it is, you know, don't really think about it that much. It just hurts every month, you know, that's it. Like,
it's awful. It's awful.
Put up with it. Yeah. And, you know, we've been working with different neuroscientists and health experts and realizing that actually not knowing what causes your pain intensifies it. So there's psychological factors that influence your experience of pain, and the mystery and not knowing actually makes it worse. So yeah, so it's being able to provide a tool that helps people understand their pain and what's causing their pain, I think is really exciting for us, and one of our, you know, key intentions with Moonai. Yeah. Yeah.
What's one of the key features of Moonai that kind of makes, you know, people be like, oh my God, like I need to download this?
The sounds. The sounds are just, it's so fascinating. So we're working with award-winning producers, neuroscientists, psychoacoustic experts who are, you know, people who study the science of sound and how sound impacts our bodies at, you know, a cellular level. And so we're working with these incredible people who know so much about the science of sound. Like, it's this whole thing. I didn't know anything about this before. You know, my co-founder, she has a music tech background, so she is versed in this. But I was like, yeah, you know, my mom's a musician. I grew up with, you know, yeah, music helps me feel better, you know, or, you know, sure, it can help me meditate or what, you know, but I didn't actually know the full extent of the impact sound can have on your body. It's fascinating. And I think this is one of the most exciting and innovative features that Moonai has, because I think most people, when we tell them, yeah, we're using sound to help relieve menstrual pain, they just kind of go like, wait, what? I've never heard about that before, and then you talk to people. I was talking to this person he's married to someone from China, and her family and ancestors had used sound healing for different purposes. And the concept of sound healing has been around for decades, and it's something that in different cultures is used for many different things, right? And so it's not new, but for most of the people we talk to, it is really innovative and really different. And so we're really excited to keep testing around this. And so far, the people we've been testing it have been reporting really, really interesting findings and feedback. It's not just any sound, I have to say. It's not like a harp or a piano playing. It's a specific frequency that changes your brain state. So so it depending on the pain you're feeling, your brain might oscillate at a specific frequency. And so what the sound does is alter that so that you go back and you revert to a pain-free state. So it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. I'm fascinated by it. We're also working with cognitive behavioral therapy as well. This is another feature that we're working on because that has shown a lot of promise in different research studies specific to PMS. So how changing your negative thought patterns also impacts the pain that you might feel, because also period pain is like, it hurts, and we know it hurts, and we think it hurts. And so there's this, in the theory of pain, it's called like a predictor theory, where if you predict it's gonna hurt, it's gonna hurt. So changing that thought pattern and that mental model will influence your experience of pain. So we're also exploring that and diving deep into that as one of the core features. And there are many more, but I think those are the most exciting ones, I think.
I feel like we would love for you to come back and maybe do a walkthrough of maybe a case study of like a feature or something, because I think this is just so fascinating. I feel like there'd be so many questions around this, but we can talk about that another time.
Totally.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up with the last question. How do you recommend showing our cognizance for business goals within case studies and interviews? So this is going back to a portfolio.
Can you say that?
Yeah. So the question's from Vivian. So this is our last one before we wrap up. How do you recommend cognizance for business goals within case studies and interviews? So how do we kind of, I think going back to, it'd be great to work on a real project on capstones, but sometimes you can't. So you maybe work on a passion project. How do you kind of state or just talk about business goals in a way that, is like, I'm aware that, there are business goals in mind, that there are things that need to be achieved. So for anyone who's going through the program, how would you advise that they kind of talk around this in their case study?
Yeah, that's tricky, especially if you haven't validated it with the business itself, right? Because at this point, you just kind of make them up because you don't really know, right, what the business goals are. So that's tricky. You could assume and be honest and transparent with that. I think, I would assume that this business would have X, Y, and Z goals, and state that clearly. I think would be something I would recommend, being honest, just being as honest as you could. Different goals and different objectives and different metrics, I think, can vary depending on the industry, depending on the project, depending on the product. And so I would probably benchmark it, is what I would say. If you can compare and see do some research and see what similar businesses maybe in an industry, maybe in the competitive analysis that you've done, and see what they might be saying, I think could be a good way to figure out what this hypothetical business of the specific industry could be thinking about. I think that's what my intuition would take me towards. Just like, okay, what are other people doing? What are other people saying? And maybe I can, think through similar. Yeah. Hopefully, I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think that's what I would do too. Start with like, what's everyone else doing, and like what makes my idea, like what makes it better, or what makes it different from these other offerings, and like how would this translate into a business proposition? So it always does come back to business. So that is a good question. Yeah. But I think that is something that is important for all of us to remember, that like we're not just designing for ourselves. We have to design with a lot of other people in mind. So there's a lot of factors that goes into product design.
Yeah, and it's really painful sometimes because your priorities as a UX designer will be so different from your business.
So different.
The business priorities, and that kind of stakeholder management is really, I mean, that's a really hard. This whole. I mean, it's a product management role, like this whole role, right? Figuring out how to intersect, the business, the tech with the user, right? And finding that middle ground is really challenging. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You just have to who you're advocating for.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So we are wrapping up. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Helena, so much for enlightening us that this topic was so different and just so truly amazing. Like I said, I would love to dive in more, just have a talk about Munai in general. Maybe when everything's a little bit more fleshed out, maybe we can hear more about it. And that'd be great. Yeah. Thank you everyone so much again for being here. I am going to post my usual spiel about this is recorded, share it out with everyone. The resources that we linked or that I linked in the chat, I will put it in the YouTube description. So in case anyone wants to reference back, they'll be there as well. But yeah, thank you, Helena, so much again. And, for your time, really, really appreciate having you here. And, let us know if there's anything we can do to help you, with all of your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to be here. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Talk to you all later. Bye.
Take care. Bye.